depending on where you are, you might have the same experience. We are just going to give it a couple of minutes until we start because people are still joining. People are still in the lobby and we're just admitting everybody. And then, yeah, we're almost ready to get started. So stay with us. All right, it looks like there aren't any more people in the lobby. So once again, to all those who just joined us, hello and welcome to Mediations. We're very excited to have you with us today for what I expect will be another really fascinating talk. We actually have a small panel for you today, which doesn't happen very often. So that's really great. And I'm just gonna, do some introductions and do some housekeeping, and then I'll hand it over to today's speakers. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenapehoak, and other Wonderwan peoples, and want to stress that this land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. So about today's session, I just want to point out that with the speaker's permission, the session is being recorded and will be shared afterwards, probably on Facebook. We kindly ask you to keep yourself muted for the duration of the talk. The presentation will last for probably a little bit over 30 minutes today because we have three separate short presentations, and after those three speakers have wrapped up their talks, we'll of course as always have some time for discussion and questions until we close the session at approximately 5:30 p.m. Questions and comments to our speakers are as always highly encouraged. If you would like to ask something or just say share any thoughts you might have, feel free to use the Zoom function to raise your hand, or also, you can also turn on your camera and gesture at us or something. That tends to work. Whatever's needed to make us notice you. Of course, you're also welcome to use the chat. We're going to be monitoring the chat and make sure that we address every question. With that being said, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Jada, Sananda, and Eben. So I'm going to start with Jada. Jada is a PhD candidate in media studies with a specialization in environment and sustainability. Jada's doctoral research focuses on the intersect of environmental justice and social movements activism in the context of anti-mining campaigns. In particular, she is looking at mobilization activities and communication strategies implemented to contrast mining projects. And we're going to hear from Jada first. But before we do that, I'm also going to introduce the other speakers. Sananda is also a PhD candidate in media studies at FIMS. She specializes in the intersections of public space, and digital infrastructures. Her previous research includes data histories, political posters and platforms, questions of collective responsibility, sites of violence in the digital sphere, and colonial narratives and photographs and memoirs by women. Sananda holds a master's in English literature and also a master's degree in journalism and English literature. And finally, Ebenezer is a PhD candidate in health information science. His thesis looks at how young male university students in Ghana get their sexual and reproductive health information and their competencies in such information practices. He relies on multiple qualitative methods to address three key research questions. And that is it for my introductions. And now I'm done talking, and I'm very excited to hand it over to our first speaker, who is Jada.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for the introduction. And it's a great opportunity for me to be a part of this panel, share a discussion with Ebenezer and Sananda. Were just some of the few examples of graduate students who had to adjust significantly their research because the pandemic has been complicating a lot of elements, particularly data collection with humans for the last 2 years. And that meant a lot of reelaboration, adjustment, and it would be a pleasure to provide maybe some insight on our own experiences, also to guide students who are in the process of advancing their dissertation. They're maybe starting and thinking about how they want to structure their data collection. And myself, as a fourth-year PhD candidate in media studies, I am currently in my data collection phase, one that had to balance the in-person format for the data collection, but also the virtual one in order to follow public health protocols. So a couple of statements about my research, also to provide more context about my own work. And Charlotte already mentioned a few elements, and particularly I am looking at how mining companies exploit natural resources in Central America, one of the most dangerous regions in the world for activists. And this danger and this vulnerable situation already meant that my dissertation and my ethics application was going to be more complicated than most. It is of the utmost importance, no matter the context, to always ensure the highest safety standards for both the participants and the researcher myself. So that was among the many challenges that I had to face in order to complete my ethics application, and doing it within the framework of health regulations and social distancing, for example. Usually the sites of mining conflicts, the people resisting extraction, are subject to increased control and repression by both the state and corporation. And in response, social and environmental movements in the region have formed alliances to resist mining operations and promote environmental justice. The case studies that I'm particularly looking at are located in Guatemala, the El Escobal case, Copinol, which is located in Honduras, and El Dorado in El Salvador. In order to address research questions that are based through the lenses of political ecology, political settlement theory, network of resistance, and communication across activists, I have been using qualitative case study research methods to examine the perspective, motivations, and goals of various actors, such as activists, community leaders, and social and environmental movements struggles against mining. For each of my 3 case studies, I've identified actors mobilizing in networks of resistance against mining activities, and analyzing the discourse and strategies that they deploy and evaluate the outcomes. So part of my overarching research questions have been focused on what are the communication means used by the network of resistance to convey information, and how do the networks engage in the co-creation of communication and meaning when deploying environmental justice claims. I won't go more in length because this talk is more about the challenges of data collection during the pandemic rather than the dissertation itself. But more specifically, my research methods include collecting data through interviews, focus group sessions, and the ensuing data transcription using a multiple source of information as a triangulation of my data to further enrich and complete knowledge towards transgressing the always limited epistemological potential of individual methods. So part of the challenge again has been including research methods that are based on 2 phases, interviews and focus group sessions, and include a recruitment process that also straddles between the in-person data collection, so interviews and focus groups in person, and the virtual one, mostly with Zoom, connecting with participants who are interested in participating in my research, organizing interviews, and the focus group sessions, which includes more than 1 participant, as you can easily imagine, in Zoom, which obviously also leads to potential questions about privacy, data storage, and safety concerns for the participants. In particular, given the sensitivity of the topic and the threat of violence faced by many of these actors who have I have interviewed and I'm still interviewing, and who take a public stance against the mines. I have recruited them through email communication, and in general, the interviewed subjects will be identified only by their general affiliation and the use of de-identified quotes throughout my dissertation. And collecting primary data usually has its own challenges, ranging from community entry, as in my case, safety of participants and of the researcher, and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has made it even more challenging for researchers to conduct in-person data collection. With the approval of our dean at FIMS, I was able to conduct in-person data collection along with the digital one. My ethics application had to include all kinds of recruitment, to the point that it became a very complex application with a lot of documents, letter of information and consent, who included verbal and written consent, depending obviously on the circumstances of the data collection. And in general, it's important to not impose risk or burden onto a community into which I'm moving whenever I'm conducting a fieldwork research. And there are a lot of other elements that are important to consider when it comes to transportation, maintaining a minimum of 2 meters of physical distance, arrange travel as well so the physical distance is maintained, and other elements: keep vehicle windows open, sanitize door handles, wear a mask during the data collection in person, and if spaces or equipment is shared, to always sanitize your hands before and after use. So those have been some of the elements that I had to address in length in my ethics application and in my dissertation proposal defense. But also another layer of challenge in this moment is the data collection and the transportation of information. So for example, if when I'm conducting interviews or focus grouping session, I record the interviews with an audio recorder and immediately transfer them to an external drive and a backup drive to a USB memory stick. There are a lot of procedures that are very important, that are highlighted by the data storage procedure in line with Western Library Resource for research data management in response to the tri-agency statement of principles on digital data and management. So traveling across different sites, making sure that this data is preserved, it's kept confidential, and also I will be able to carry it with me once I reach Canada, and then it will stay in the office of my supervisor. So that has been one of the layer of challenge in terms of the data collection, but also a detailed list identifying the potential risks to student researcher, myself. COVID-19 related risks, some I've already mentioned, high crime in my case, high crime levels in certain regions, and state violence, but also the identification of potential risks and mitigation solutions for participants who are particularly vulnerable to attacks and threats because of their activism and their work. So it is important to keep in mind all these elements when drafting your ethics application, and these concerns go beyond the pandemic, but obviously the pandemic add one other layer of concern when it comes to the health and safety of both participants and the researcher. So I highly recommend developing also re-entry plans that are specific to the research situation you're looking at with the mindset of safety. And this plan should consider, for example, the ability to adhere to safety guidelines, and that ability must be considered in each decision regarding the research plan, the research field for this dissertation, the research data collection, and also the transportation of data across different sites. So these are just to provide really some of the many elements I've been working with in the past few months. It has been pretty challenging also because the travel ban at Western in the meantime has been lifted and put in place once again. So there were moments where the in-person data collection looked more feasible than others, and having contingency plan, meaning data collection that includes both methodologies, I think it's a way of proceeding that it took a lot of time, but it was essential for my type of research. A lot of the actors I've been interviewing do not have access to a reliable internet connection. They don't feel as comfortable in maybe having an interview on Zoom. So the in-person element is still very prominent and very important. And it is essential for me to provide alternatives to accommodate the needs of the participants as well. And at the same time, for those who feel comfortable and avoid further exposure, having the possibility of conducting virtual interviews and focus group sessions is an immense resource. So the process is ongoing, it's not concluded yet. And I think it's fascinating to also navigate through these different realms of data collection. And I hope I was able to kind of share a little bit my experience, which again, it took a lot of time to complete the ethics application, but at least once you have a thorough contingency plans, you can think that you're pretty much ready for everything that might come along your way and the development of your investigation. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jada, for sharing this with us. And yes, one round of virtual applause for you. Zoom challenge today, I can't find it. No, here it is. Okay, perfect. So as I said earlier, we'll do Q&A at the end of all of our 3 presentations. So I'm going to now hand it over to Sananda.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes, yes, we can.
Thank you very much for having me. And without much of introduction, I'll just launch my spiel. In the months before the pandemic, when the countries shut down international travel, as you know, in an unprecedented move, I had designed my thesis keeping in mind in-person data collection. Keeping in mind the pandemic-induced restrictions, I had to do away with the possibility of interviewing families of victims of violence and civil society activists, as well as visiting the police stations in India to get documents such as first information reports. This change in research design changed my project's thesis, as you can imagine. Rather than focusing on human subjects as source of data, I decided to focus on archives as my primary data source. That meant that my thesis now relied on the theory of representation. While it took time to reorient my thesis and rethink the theories I needed to use, unlike many researchers such as Eben and Jada, I am now privileged not to be working with human subjects. That made my data collection process much easier. I did not need any detailed survey, face-to-face interviews, or focus group discussions. All these types of research were paused, keeping in mind the health and safety issues and logistical difficulties during the pandemic. In my case, however, the difficulty in accessing my data was in getting access to the archives. Qualitative research makes use of data gathered to analyze representation of perceptions, worldviews, or ideologies. One of the common data collection techniques is to visit the archives. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, several of the archives, including the British Library, were closed at various points in 2020. Last year in 2021, when the libraries and archives started to reopen, I decided to finally visit the archive that I wanted in the UK. And by fall 2021, the library reading rooms were finally open and the opening hours had regularized. That said, the data collection process has been difficult. My major archive is in the UK. Since Western University did not approve international travel for research last year, I had to get a special authorization to travel. I was advised at that point by Western Travel to get an additional international medical coverage apart from my SOGS health plan. I also needed to get plane tickets with flexible travel dates in case of emergency change in plans. And both of these added to the overall expenses that also included the usual visa fees, local accommodation costs, local transportation, and everyday living expenses. And there was a whole bunch of paperwork. Travel, especially during the pandemic, has the added cost of costs and time involved for COVID testing. Last semester, before I traveled, I needed to get a fit for travel test in Canada to enter the UK. Even though I was fully vaccinated, I had to keep updated on the travel requirements that changed every 2 to 3 weeks. I also needed to fill a passenger locator form to enter the UK. And the fact that I was scammed of to pay for this fee that is otherwise free is another story. Even before I entered the UK, I had to buy a day 2 COVID test from a private provider, and I needed to report the results to the government after I arrived. Before I returned to Canada, I needed a fit for travel test again. I paid for the test and mailed back the sample as directed on time, but its results did not arrive even 2 hours before my flight, by which time I was at the airport. At the Heathrow airport, therefore, I had to arrange for another much more expensive test. Since Canadian government did not accept the rapid antigen test, I needed to get a PCR and another type of test whose results take at least 2 hours to come. So the moral of the story is always come 5 hours before your flight time to the airport. The cost involved was additional to the hassle and stress of the airport, and I was left wondering if I could even take the flight back home that day and whether I needed to buy another ticket. Given that it was a week away from Christmas, I was not even sure I could get another ticket soon enough. Eventually, I was able to get on the flight, and I was able to arrive at the Toronto airport on time. But I was selected here, randomly selected to do an on-arrival COVID test. Here too, there was a long queue of passengers, and the airport was, and since the airport Wi-Fi was down, the whole process was delayed. So after an hour, I was cleared and just made it to my connecting shuttle ride back to London. So I detail these steps to show that the story of data collection during the pandemic is really a story of COVID testing for data collection. All these steps meant that travel to archives needed detailed planning and arranging for the costs involved. To make up for the data that I could not collect in person, I also used personal subscriptions to a digital archive. However, one must remember that digital archives are not exhaustive simply because the libraries are yet to digitize all their items. So that's my story of data collection during the pandemic, and I want to hand over to Eben.
Thank you so much, Sananda. And of course, also for you, a warm virtual applause. Very interesting to hear about the caveats of doing anything during COVID. Eben, are you ready? You're off camera, so just checking in on you.
I'm trying to share my screen, yeah.
Yes, all right. Feel free to do that. Yeah, that's looking good. We can see a PowerPoint slide that says data collection during the pandemic when the unwritten rules become the applied rules.
Okay, thank you so much. For once, you may think that because I didn't perhaps go to the site to take data physically, maybe my story will be better, but wait till I come to the end of my own story. I'm supervised by Dr. Annabelle Kwanhasi, and for today, I'm going to give an overview of my thesis, zoom in on the methodology, where I'll look at the approach I took overall, the intended data collection strategy, and then how COVID changed the whole story, and then dwell on some lessons learned. So, as the aspect of health, focusing on the emotional, psychosocial, and functional well-being of the reproductive system and processes, the significance of sexual and reproductive health in the transition of young people into adulthood cannot be overemphasized. But in the justifiable attempt to highlight the ongoing risks faced by young girls and women, sexual-related health research, policy, and practice often miss the unique vulnerabilities of adolescent and young adult males. Apart from their strict adherence to traditional masculinity, issues such as the liberal academic environment, intense peer pressure, drug-related unprotected sex, and low utilization of sexual and reproductive health services make the situation of adolescent and young adult males even more concerning. Thus, when the tenets of masculinity are extended into heterosexual romantic relationships in patriarchal societies such as Ghana is, It further worsens the sexual and reproductive health burdens which women and girls already face, like unsafe abortion, HIV/AIDS, and gender-based inequalities. Whereas I concede that this dearth narrative has seen gradual reversal with increasing interest in male-focused sexual and reproductive health research, the current complexion of the information landscape demands a further look into adolescent and young adult male sexual and reproductive health. Why do I say so? The evolution of the information landscape, occasioned by the improvements in digital technologies, has led to a substantial adoption of internet-enabled platforms by young people across the globe amid issues such as misinformation, disinformation, fake news, post-truths, among others. These trends provide a unique opportunity to not only explore adolescent and young adult males' sources of sexual and reproductive health information, but also examine the competencies they develop to sustain, apply, and evaluate information into their sexual and reproductive health decisions within the sexual and reproductive health care environment and beyond. To put it aptly, I ask this overarching question: where and how do young male university students in Ghana get their sexual and reproductive health information, and what competencies are exhibited in their information practices or behavior? I approach this from the constructivist paradigm using multiple qualitative methods and aim to produce an integrated article thesis, which comprises 3 primary research data articles elicited through talk aloud method, interspersing interviews, and of course, qualitative social network name generator questions. This will be preceded by a scoping review article, which is currently almost ready for the press. Let me at this point concentrate on the data collection aspect of my methodology. I would like to take you through what I intended to do and proceed with what I did, or better still, what I'm doing. So I'm engaging 17 to 24-year-old male university students in Ghana as my participants. And the intention was to get these people through convenience sampling. That is, people who are willing and able to participate, elect themselves to be put on the research. 32 participants, or until I get to saturation, was the focus for sampling. The strategies to get these people were through the word of mouth, social media strategies, as well as if a participant got onto the data collection process and saw it worthy to recommend to a friend, the person could also contact us. Again, the study was to occur at a research space within the library, which is equipped with an internet-enabled computer. And when I usher the participant into the room, I'll first give him a hypothetical SRH-themed question for which the participant will look for information online or through whichever means. And then as the person is gathering information to answer this question, I engage him in a kind of a discussion to know the processes that's going on within the decisions that he's making. After this, then I continue with a question and answer session from the semi-structured interview guide. There would be a break, a snack break, followed by the personal or social network analysis session. And here, the participant would, or it was intended that the participant would be given a sheet containing 4 circles, 4 concentric circles, with a participant in the middle. And then I will ask for the roles of 3 personal information sources. That's people that they get sexual and reproductive health information from. And then when these persons are provided, I'll follow up on key functions played by these authors regarding the sexual and reproductive health information, both in the online and offline space. This was the intention. But then, of course, COVID-19 changed everything. So to bring you up to speed, the COVID-19 pandemic affected my intended data collection strategy in two broader ways. Administratively, there were some delays in getting ethics approval from the two main Guinean institutions that I had selected to engage. Apart from the COVID-19, which occasioned the closure of some government-assisted universities, there were also a protracted industrial action in some public universities. Of course, because I wouldn't be present, the fact that Ghana led Canada 5 hours with respect to time also created a little bit of difficulties in getting participants for the data collection exercise. Also, the fact that participants had to sit behind a screen for the entire duration of the data collection was a little bit difficult. Some participants couldn't spend more than an hour for us to do the data collection, so it was another bigger challenge. Yes, Ghana is in Africa, so I need not dwell much on the electricity situation. A lot of the students don't have laptops, so it was their mobile phones that they were going to use for us to undertake the data collection exercise. And for some of the things that I needed to do in the virtual data collection exercise, phones wouldn't provide that kind of luxury that I needed. Closely related to the electricity issue is the fact that internet connectivity is not as pervasive as it should be in other developed countries. So Ghana is a developing country and internet connectivity is a little bit of an issue. The availability and the cost were the two main concerns. So to undo this situation, I had to quickly reapply to the Western Ethics Board, asking to include 3 additional universities so that whoever gave me ethics approval first, I go ahead to use their students. After all, I needed university students 17 to 24 who are males, willing and able to participate. So which institution they were attending wasn't much of an issue here. Now, the main technology that I relied on was Zoom. Again, due to the internet connectivity issues, I had to rely on only the audio function. But you know that for qualitative methods, verbal and non-verbal cues are very important. So when you are unable to do a video kind of data collection, it loses that aspect, that value of getting to observe how the participant is behaving. Again, funny enough, in adhering to strict ethics protocol, I needed the express approval of the participants. So when we start the data collection exercise, then I asked to record the session. And in sticking to this, it so happened that sometimes I forgot to ask them to record the interview session and only remembered halfway through the interview. And it really led to some pieces of the data getting lost. Email, WhatsApp was relied upon very well in engaging the participants before, after, and during the data collection exercise. So these are by way of technology. The duration of the data collection was 90 to 120 minutes. That's almost 2 hours. But then to get the talk aloud or think aloud session, what I did was I provided a hypothetical question to the participant and asked for a short break whereby the participant could use their phone to search for information online, note down their responses, and then when they come in, as they give me the responses to the question, then I ask them some of the decisions, how they went through getting the questions and all the other ones that I would have done had it been that I was present with the participant in an in-person data collection mode. For the personal or social network analysis or the EagleNet data, what I did was I showed the concentric circles on screen for the participant to have an idea of what is it that I wanted. The participant provided the roles of the people who they get their sexual and reproductive health information from, and I proceeded with the name generator questions. And because of the inconsistency in the time, the fact that I couldn't at times get the full availability of the participants to complete the entire data collection process, what I did was to do interview. After an interview, I do memoing, I'll transcribe, code, memo, and then interview again, so that I will leave some room to take care of some of these inconsistencies or challenges. Also, to do with the internet cost and unavailability, I pleaded with participants to get to locations where the internet connectivity was a little bit stronger. So I had to pay for the transportation and also the cost of data. These are some few lessons to share with colleagues. The first is engage the major stakeholders that you are doing this with. And the first is the supervisor and the supervisory committee. I will at this juncture thank my supervisor, Dr. Annabelle Kwanhasi, so much for all the good advice that she provided when I hit the wall. Again, some senior colleagues might have gone through these issues already. So it is advisable that we keep talking to them. And I make reference to Dr. Uche. He was supposed to have been in Liberia and Nigeria to collect his data, but the COVID-19 denied him the opportunity to do so. So he had already been in my shoe before, or I was in his shoe already. So he provided me with invaluable pieces of advice. Again, because I wasn't there in person, I had to rely so much on my contact person. There is a tendency for me to have thought that because all the universities that I was going to engage a participant, I more or less have familiarity with. So I was going to run the show, do things my way. But when I relied on the contact persons, in this case, they really helped to make life a little bit easier for me. And also, due to the fact that I wasn't going to get the privilege of getting the participant one-on-one, I needed to engage them thoroughly before, during, and after to let them be so willing, let them feel that they are a major stakeholder for this PhD research. And with that established, they were more than eager to engage in the data collection exercise and give me my all, which I think was very helpful in scaling up the COVID-19 pandemic challenges. Again, one major lesson that I would like colleagues to also note is that you may want to regain the lost period that the COVID-19 has caused, but it could be counterproductive. What I would say is that the PhD has many parts. So if the data collection is not possible now, you can look at the other aspects of the PhD. If nothing at all, you can start formatting your referencing. After all, referencing takes a lot of time when we are almost done with our project, so you can do that. But if you are still frustrated, you can stay away from the thesis a little bit, try new things or do some things that you love. And in this case, you will come back to the data collection exercise with new ideas and strategies to get it moving forward. There is a lot I can say, but due to time, I'll pause here and invite as many questions as possible. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is my first time at mediations, and I don't take this lightly at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evan. I didn't realize this was your first mediations talk, so congratulations on completing that.
Thank you.
Great. So a big thank you to all of our speakers today. I'm just, yes, I just had needed to switch back to gallery. So big round of applause for all of you. I think this is a really fascinating mix of very tangible and very practical descriptions of the various challenges that we've been facing, and also some very welcome practical advice, which is helpful for everybody who's in, in a research-based program and who's still, planning their data collection, as I am right now. And I know a bunch of people who are in that stage as well. So we really appreciate that. And yeah, so questions or comments to our three panelists. And I'm watching the chat. Yeah, so for now, there aren't any questions in the chat. Does anybody, Lisa, go ahead.
I don't have a question, and I don't supervise any of you, obviously. I just want to say as a group how moving and extraordinary I think these presentations are, and how meaningful I think they would be to PhD students across campus and elsewhere. And how, where people are, we talk a lot about resilience, and it gets trying sometimes, but beyond resilience, I'm quite moved by this. Beyond resilience, I just, you're doing work, you're doing international work. Sometimes you're traveling, trying to travel, coming up with new possibilities. And then when you're not able to travel, I think beyond resilience, depth and creativity are more, methodological and otherwise are more illuminating terms here. But I'm just sort of dazzled and proud to call myself Dean of FIMS right now, and usually, but in this moment in particular. So thank you.
Thank you for that comment. And I was just, just bouncing off that point. Have you considered submitting this as a conference panel? Because I think that would be very cool. Pam, did I just steal your comment? I didn't mean to, but you're nodding. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Now, I was just going to ask, at the beginning, all of these decisions and workarounds that you made would have felt like they were something negative. They involved more work, but I'm wondering if what these changes have allowed you to do or to learn that you wouldn't have done or learned had things gone according to plan.
Well, maybe I can start. And thank you for the question. Thank you also for your kind words, Lisa. And I think in my case, actually, one of the case studies that I'm looking at had some very positive outcomes. And I think if I hadn't taken the extra time to design my data collection and I would have proceeded a little earlier, I wouldn't have been able to incorporate that change. And it's really positive in terms of the role of, in my case, the role of communication networks in resisting and banning mining projects. So I think the extra time, besides giving me more time to go through the literature, explore more in length certain authors that maybe I would have just approached really quickly before, it really meant sitting down, really thinking with even more careful accuracy what kind of data collection I wanted to have, design it also much more closely with partners. In my case, I have there's an alliance that I'm working with closely in Central America against mining, and they've been really helpful with the recruitment process. So I think narrowing down certain aspects as well of data collection, I've been working a lot more on the questions I wanted to ask. So I think as Ebenezer also mentioned, just because you might be a little stuck with the data collection and the design of your data collection doesn't mean there are other things you can do. And in that case, the extra time, even though it's a double-edged sword, it kind of helped me, and also wait for a more favorable outcome for at least one of my case studies, one that actually proves a little more the assumptions that I'm already including in my dissertation.
If I should go next, I would say that I will never take any situation for granted again, so long as research is concerned. And here is why. I work back home in Ghana at the University of Cape Coast. And even prior to my ethics application, I had consulted the director of research, learning about how to go about my ethics application and all that. So I thought I knew inside out how to go through the University of Cape Coast ethics application. And to cut matters short, it was just last January or so that I had my ethics clearance from my very own university that I work with. So I am thinking that with data collection, right from the word go, look for systems, set up a miniature system so that everything will more or less move in line. Because if you say that you are going to do it all by yourself, you are going to use your personality to post things, it will never work. But when I used contact people, knew the portfolio of this person, where to move from this person to next person, everything started working smoothly for me. So if possible, create a miniature system for that very data collection process. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can add like a couple of lines, I agree with both Jada and Evan. For me, it was more of a challenge, like it challenged me to think theoretically, to think of different theories and methodologically as well. And before, where I was thinking more from the perspective of the subject, the human subject. Now I'm thinking more in terms of representation of these subjects. And I think it aligns my research more closely with the media and media studies. And also the keeping the focus on archives was very interesting, because just going through, spending some time in the archives gives you so many ideas, and the historical archive especially, that it throws up like even some ideas can even be like a thesis in itself, like a PhD thesis, a postdoc thesis in themselves. So it was good in a way, even though it added like 1.5 to 2 years to this whole process of completing the PhD, I think.
I think as researchers, we rarely talk about what goes wrong, and things always go wrong. And for new researchers, if you just read the final paper where it looks like everything, or the final book where it looks like everything was perfect all the way through, you don't hear the full story. So I think it's really, really important to share these stories of what went wrong, how you overcame it, and what turned out to be a benefit from it going the way that it did. So thank you everyone for this. I may call on you later on to share this with other students.
Thank you so much, everyone. Do we have more questions, comments? Ananda, I just saw that you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add anything else?
Oh, I just wanted to ask Evan a question. He said that don't focus on making up for the waste time. So how do you go about that? Like, how do you reconcile with the fact that you have lost so much of time and, you know?
Thank you so much. So my PhD trajectory had a little bit of interruption. So, sorry, thank you so much. So my PhD trajectory had a little bit of interruption. So I couldn't do one very important course in first year, second year. That's the PhD FIMS 9008, which is about professionalization. So when my data collection wasn't going as smooth as I thought, I saw that this was a best opportunity to take up this course. And I will tell you that it's one of the best courses that I have taken since I started my PhD. And also, Professor Adhere advised me to take a course from Professor Paulette, Human Information Practices. And I was just looking at the opportune time to take this course. And so when my data collection, I could tell that things were going to delay. I enrolled for this course and I realized how instrumental this course was going to be for my thesis, because I'm looking at the sexual and reproductive health information behavior and sexual reproductive health literacy. So I now got the theoretical understanding of information behavior, information practices, and then our good old PAM has a very wonderful publication which really informed a lot of the decisions that I took. So I will say that I was better off. There were a lot of things that I got from this disruption from COVID, especially the 2 courses that I took. Thank you.
Wow, that's such a great way to make up for lost time, really. And it also encourages you, I think, right?
Exactly.
That you're not wasting time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments for our 3 panelists? Doesn't look like it.
If I can have one more question.
Of course, go for it.
So is there, did you have to travel to the host country, Jada, and did pandemic throw up like any, I'm guessing the kind of restrictions that they had, did that throw up any special challenges during data collection?
It's an interesting question because I would say not as much, and truly this speaks a lot about the different experience that each country has had. The cases here never been too high. The weather in the regions where I'm working in is relatively warm all year long, which allows for a lot of outdoor activities. Vaccination rate has been really excellent, for example, in El Salvador, where I'm based. So it's I still push for virtual data collection for different reasons whenever I can, and by pushing me like give that options as well. And I understand that it might make people a little more safe, but it has been challenging also because, again, when I started, there was a little bit of time where traveling was permitted, then it wasn't, and then I had to apply for, as you said, international medical coverage. To fill out a form, like a very comprehensive form with detailed list of where I was staying, my traveling plans, and contingency plan should I, get infected in any time during my data collection. So far so good. I think it's every day you never know, but I would say maybe a month ago I was more concerned because also a month ago the situation was way worse in a lot of more countries. I think the concern with Omicron was way more prominent, so it has affected a little bit, but not as much as I thought. So this also speaks, I think, to your experience where your data was in the UK, and so different rules, different context, different timing when it came to opening. And this is also a challenge for all of us. Like, we are in North America, and the lockdowns have taken place in different times, maybe compared to Ghana or other countries in Europe. So it's also a challenge. Like, when we're about to open up, other countries are closed, and vice versa. So it's been also a part of frustration, because you're like, if you feel very powerless, like most people in general, but you really feel powerless, and it's really hard to get your hopes high anyway. And all of us are also international students, so there's also that layer of complexity we've had to deal with for the last few years. So yeah, that's been an issue.
Eben, go for it.
I also say something little. For me, going to collect my data in Ghana was going to kind of be using one stone to kill 2 birds, in the sense that I was going to get the opportunity to see my family aside the data collection. So when I wasn't able to do that, it was really unsettling. It was very much unsettling, but I got a realization of how technology can kind of take away all the challenges that some of these pandemics can bring our way. So I look at 2 systems. In North America, Canada, and other developed countries, when the COVID came, they were able to quickly mobilize and switch to virtual education format. But in Ghana and in most African countries, we had to shut down our education system until after some time before. And right after this COVID, I can tell you that a lot of universities in Ghana have invested in technologies that is going to let them be able to withstand shocks of this nature. So maybe if it so happens that another pandemic or another crisis come our way, I'm very sure that the way that different regions in the world are going to face it is going to be somewhat improved, unlike what happened previously. Yeah.
Thank you, Evan. Lisa, go for it.
Yeah, Evan, I wanted to ask a question in response to something you just said. Do you think that Ghanaian universities that invested in these platforms in light of what had happened will use them for other things, not waiting for an emergency, but like the prospect of being able to take a course at a Ghanaian university is pretty thrilling. I expect for people in different places, and I wonder if you have any sense of that, if there will be other forms of engagement in light of these investments.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. What I would say is that most Ghanaian institutions, because of difficulty in access, have adopted what we call distance education. So it is a kind of open education system whereby you don't necessarily have to be on campus, but you can access education like other regular students will. But what was missing in this component was technology. So with the coming in of COVID and the investment in this technology at the local setting, at the Ghana level, I can say that a lot of the distance education program are making good the distance aspect of the education program. So going forward, I'm pretty sure that a lot of the institutions will align with sister institutions. For instance, the University of Cape Coast has a pact with Western University in some departments. So I'm very sure that this is going to be pushed. The frontiers of this collaboration is going to be pushed, likewise other institutions, so that visiting professors wouldn't have to board a plane to be on the campuses to actually render lectures, but they can deliver their lectures in the comfort of their offices in Canada or wherever they find themselves. And to say this, I'm even collaborating with my university librarian. So I'm a practicing librarian before I came here. And then we do take some courses in information literacy. So I'm in talks with my library manager. If maybe on my part, I could run a course even from here in the information literacy aspect, so that we will get opportunity to learn about new technologies and all that. And all these are courtesy COVID-19. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Evan, I was curious about something that you mentioned, and you talked about some of your participants not having access to laptops, and actually, you having to conduct some of your research on mobile devices, which I think is really interesting in terms of, so I was just, and forgive me if I don't remember this correctly, but was it interviews you conducted through mobile devices, or was it something like a focus group?
Okay, so it is interviews. I engaged them one-on-one, not as a group, but it was interspersed with fact finding or information finding to address a hypothetical question. So it just wasn't about audio. There was the need for them to perform, and also, if possible, to see them do the performance. But that was not to be, because on mobile phones, it was very difficult. And also the data didn't allow for the video aspect of the interview.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for clarifying. Okay, do we have any other questions? I'm conscious of time. Not that, I have to run, but we are at just slightly after 5:30. So curious if there are any other questions or comments. If not, we have your email addresses. So we might be reaching out to you. I'm not seeing anything. So yes, I want to say thank you to all of our panelists for this really interesting, mix of perspectives. And thank you so much for sharing your very honest, sometimes frustrations and learnings with us. That was really valuable. And I look forward to hearing more, and maybe, like a collection of best practices might come out of this, or even a conference panel or something like that. So keep us posted. And thank you so much to everybody else who was on the session today, who contributed, asked questions, made comments, or just listened and was here and participated in mediations. We appreciate all of you and look very much forward to seeing you again next week, because we have another fascinating talk lined up for you, which I think Effie is going to share the program with you shortly. So next week, we're going to dive deeply down into the rabbit hole that is Reddit and hear from Brittany about communicating gender discourse on the subreddit female dating strategy, which should be really fun. Okay, so thank you so much for that, Effie. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, I look very much forward to seeing you all again next week. Have a lovely rest of your day and take care. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you so much. See you soon.